Commission work session order on June 12th.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. We're calling this session of June 12th to order. We don't have to do a flag salute. Roll call.
Commissioner Pauley? Here. Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Roth?
Here.
And Commissioner Smith? Mayor Neely?
Okay. So, are there any future agenda items?
Future agenda items, I thought of one, and that is I would like to have a combined meeting with the Main Street Board to see how the EID is working and if they're doing okay down there.
Combined commission?
Yeah.
Like invite them to a work session?
Yes,
Yeah, good
Okay.
idea.
Sounds good.
with the Main Street Board. Just see how things are going. I know they got issues with parking, but I wanted to know about the EID.
Very good. Anything else?
Last commission meeting, Eric talked about new incentive tools for industrial land, and I was just, interested in digging deeper into that, and maybe even combine or having urban renewal in the topic in regards to that. So I don't know how to approach that, if that would come up in a work session or what.
Well, we could put a discussion on for the work session to have him present the tools and just kind of walk you through what he's thinking for options there, and then let you know if there's any action that you would need to take as a commission.
Okay, that would be good.
We can put
Thank
that on
you.
for a future work session.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Sounds
a
good.
discussion item. Yep.
Thank you. Any others? Anybody?
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So our discussion item tonight is the transportation system plan update. And so I would assume that's Nancy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's me. Well, we're here, this is our first presentation, formal presentation to the City Commission. We gave the same presentation to the Planning Commission last night. I had a real nice, informative, very productive conversation with the Planning Commission.
Good.
And we've been working on it for about 9 months. We've gotten a whole lot of the technical work behind us, and we'll be showing you some goals and objectives tonight and seeing if they're essentially slight revisions to what was in our old TSP.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have dug through the existing conditions in the city and looked at future conditions based on Metro's projections for growth, and have come up with a list of gaps and deficiencies. And we won't get into those too much tonight, but we'll just, this is more of an update, and then in the future we'll be looking at those in more detail. We have a open house next Monday night where we will be showing those on a map and having people make comments and those kinds of things. So I want to introduce Carl Springer. He's from DKS and Associates, and he is the transportation engineer who is been managing the TSP from the consultant side of it. And Laura Butler, Laura Turway is here. Once you know someone for this long, Laura, you're always going to be Laura Butler, Laura Turway to me. But she's also here. She's our assistant project manager, and she's been working very, very hard on coordinating all of the city activities and getting out there and trying to get the word out to the public. And she'll be chiming in a little bit tonight as well.
Good.
Carl, why don't you? Carl's got a real good presentation here for you, and I'll be inserting comments as the evening goes on. And this is very informal. Feel free to ask questions at any time. We want your feedback. Carl?
Right. Thanks. Again, I'm Carl Springer, DKS Associates. We're a company that exclusively does transportation engineering and planning. That's pretty much all we do, and that's all I've been doing for about 30 years now. I'm happy to be back in Oregon City to be working on this project. I've been working in Oregon City for about 15 years off and on, working with Nancy for a long time, so I'm sorry to see her leaving. She's got a lot of good things done here in the city. But onward ho. Let's see. So I'm assuming you all are familiar with what a TSP is. It's basically a document that helps you manage where you're going to invest your money to serve growth in terms of transportation. The region's been doing transportation system plans for about 25 years now. And I think we're on generation 3, or maybe it's 4. But as we progress, we learn things that TSB should and should not do. And so this time around, there's a couple areas we're really focusing on more than the plan you already have in place. And bear in mind, and this is an update, and so we're carrying forward a lot of the material from that plan. We're not discarding it in any sense. In fact, a lot of the policies and recommendations really are carried forward intact from that old plan. We're just kind of looking at different features this time around. Specifically, one of the biggest differences this time around, we're looking for growth all the way out to 2035. So it's growth. Bear in mind, we've got some maps coming up in this presentation that focus really just on the city, but bear in mind, all the forecasting we do is for the entire metro region. So we're looking at job and housing growth from Clark County all the way down to Wilsonville, all the way from Troutdale out to Forest Grove. That whole stretch is what we're looking at. So any growth in any one of those areas that people that live or work or do things in your city from any of those, it's all connected. So that's part of the piece we're looking at. So this time around, we'll tend to spend more emphasis on finer grain analysis for something other than cars. My history as a traffic engineer, and then I was a traffic engineer for quite a while, and then I became a transportation planner. The focus has historically been on getting the cars around relatively easily, especially for a few hours a day. And I've come to appreciate the fact that the day is 24 hours long, and so why not think about what's happening those other 20 hours of the day and what it's like to live in those situations those other 20 hours of the day. And specifically, that speaks to the people who walk and ride bikes and have to get to transit. They definitely see getting larger facilities as a downside, as opposed to being in a car at the busiest time of day. They look at that as an upside because they have to wait less. So this time around, we're going to be looking at all facets of transportation and looking at them in much more detail. And Nancy mentioned we've done a lot of technical work. We're down in the bottom left corner there looking at solutions. We really haven't picked which solutions we like a lot. We've put out technical memos that say, here's, based on the way we've looked at the way your system performs today, where you think growth is going to occur in the city, here's the kinds of solutions we think you should be considering. We're not to the point yet where we've really identified which ones are the best set for the city. It's not like we're going to discard the other ones, but we're going to kind of push the favored ones to the top. One of the things we need to do this time around, and most people appreciate this way of looking at a plan, is we're going to actually figure out a way to make sure any projects that are put on the responsibility of the city can have a reasonable chance of being funded. So this will be a reasonably funded plan. And that hasn't been true historically, not just in Oregon City, but in all the other cities. They've come up with massive project lists, but no particular way to pay for it when you get down to the bottom of it, which seems kind of crazy in the current economic environment, but that's just the way it was. So it's not like you were doing anything wrong back then. But that's certainly a focus of this piece. So there's some questions coming up a little bit later in the presentation about kind of where the money's coming from now. And if we want to do something different than what we're doing now, then we need to start thinking about what else we might be doing for collecting revenue for transportation purposes. So as you can see, we're getting down to the end. We've got a group of solutions identified. The last two pieces are putting the teeth on that plan update, the implementation ordinances, any kind of comp plan amendments, that kind of a thing. And then we're bringing it to the Planning Commission to get their buy-off, and then they'll make recommendation to this body for you guys to adopt. So the process behind the scene, there's quite a few iterations. The work we develop is in increments. We come up with technical memos. We have a grand total of 12 of them. We finished 10 of the 12. And so we post those up on the web, and we iterate with the management team, the city staff, ODOT management staff, and get buy it at that level. And then we vet it in a bigger form with the technical advisory group and the stakeholders advisory group to get their feedback and take those revisions into effect. And then eventually we'll be rolling that into the new draft TSP document. Like I said before, it carries a lot of the pieces of the old one together forward, One thing we're going to do when we republish the TSP, though, is we're going to try to make it a little more user-friendly, a little less technical.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Because only traffic engineers and transportation planners appreciate the technical. All the 99% of the other readers really, it's not what they're looking for. So we'll try to reformat it and characterize it that way. If you've had a chance to go online, the city's done a good job of posting all this stuff on the website. If you've looked at some of the documents so far, we've tried to do that more so than in the past. A lot of the cases, there's half-page summaries that basically tells you what this thing's all about. And so we're trying to gear it that way. So folks like yourself that don't have an hour to dedicate to read, one piece of report can make it through. One of the big differences of this version of the TSP is we're going to have what's called performance targets. In the olden days, not olden days, we're still doing it, but we're doing.
Yeah, we're not that old, Carl.
We're not that old. I have a grandson though, so
This is
it's a different situation.
we've progressed to a
We progressed,
new
yes.
process.
There
And
you
the
go.
old-
I love it.
The way we used to do it when I first came to Portland in 1996, you do these analysis, you still have multimodal maps, you still have a bike and a ped and a transit map, but the one metric that really drove the whole story was how well traffic flowed in those peak hours. And the volume to capacity ratio ruled the day. It was the ring that ruled them all. And so that has been true historically. This time around, we're going to have other measures to see how well transit's working, how well pedestrian systems are working. Not only do you have where the gaps are in the system, because any city like this that has a long history of streets that are old, growth comes and the streets don't quite catch up with the growth. So you've got a lot of streets that aren't quite there yet. But you also have to think about where people want to go to. You look at the major destinations and think of which of those gaps are the most critical gaps. You can't. It'd be nice if you could fill all the gaps. Well, what we want to identify are which are the most important gaps to do first, and go from there. There's requirements for us to look at a more significant way at safety. Freight movement. I know the city doesn't have that much freight based in Oregon City, but as a consideration for all the metro cities to look at that. And there's a new term, I think it's up on the screen there, called reliability. It applies more generally to all kinds of motor vehicle travel, but in this case, it applies to freight reliability. What that really says is they're looking for consistency in what travel time between points A and B. So if there's a truck that needs to go to, say, downtown Portland 5 times, every day, they want that travel time to be a relatively consistent time. Same with commutes. The same kind of principle applies. So, no longer are we trying to get everybody there at 50 miles an hour. We're just trying to get there at 30 miles an hour, but the same 30 miles an hour every day. So people can plan their schedules accordingly. For freight movers, that ends up being changes in resources, right? That's staff and extra trucks and, more loading docks and all those kinds of things. So if you can stabilize that, you make significant progress. So there's lots of other elements up there I won't go into in a great deal because we're going to spend a little bit more time about mobility standards in a minute. But basically we're going to find, the way I guess I characterize this is we take the goals you have, and I'll have a slide about this in a minute. Maybe I should, well, I'm not quite there yet. That's a couple of, we take the goals you have and we try to quantify how well they fit the project we're talking about. So it's not just the mobility goal, but all the other goals about safety, accessibility, and give you kind of a rating system for the way we look at these things.
And actually, there's also an equity. Isn't equity something we need to look at too, or is that just on projects we're going to be building?
There is equity that we have to address, and it's the way it's characterized is an accessibility.
Accessibility.
And so, everybody has a chance to get to major destinations within a reasonable time frame, and that addresses the portion of the community that may or may not have a car or may or may not want to drive a car. And a lot of the times, the way the streets and the transportation system is set up, it's difficult to not drive a car. So there's measures to see functionally how that works, and you kind of target your solutions to break down some of those barriers. That makes sense. But yeah, it also affects where you put projects. I mean, you have to start thinking about you don't want to disproportionately impact lower income community portion of the community, those kinds of things.
Or seniors.
Or seniors. I mean, that's a state regulation that we have to pay attention to as we go through this. This slide is about kind of the evolution of developing solutions, the kind of the place we're at right now. And so where you start with, the new acronym up at the top, that's Transportation System Management and Operations. Basically, you're tweaking the system to see if you can make it more efficient without building new facilities. Moving down, you're trying to find ways to allow people to choose pedestrian or bike or get better access to transit than they have today. And you probably know that the research, especially for bike riders, if you look at if you asked 100 people whether they ride their bike or they want to ride their bike or they'll never ride their bike, there's a large area in the middle that says, yeah, we'd like to ride bikes, but it's really not very safe to ride bikes, and so I probably choose not to most of the time. A lot of the projects that we're going to talk about in this plan update will be focusing on that kind of a thing. And so you're not just providing the facilities, looking at where the facilities need to be, but you're looking at kind of comfort and convenience and safety of bike riding, because that's a big piece of it, frankly. For a large sector of the community, that's why they avoid it. It's not because there's not a bike lane there. It's because there's other elements going on that make them feel unsafe to be in the bike lane. So moving down the chart, certainly land use strategies come into play in terms of managing demand and that kind of a thing. The last couple, there are a few cases in the city where we're looking at opportunities that are feasible and reasonable to make local connection. It could be a full-on local street connection, or they could be just a trail type connection where it's just ped and bike only. And the last step that we look at is either new roadways or expanding the roadways that you have. In kind of the descending order, it almost, except for the one in the middle, land use strategies I don't think is very costly, but they're just kind of descending order in cost. The top, the operational ones are far, far cheaper than the ones at the bottom. Roadway expansions, new roadways are significantly more expensive than anything else on that list, frankly. So,
Can you give an example of Tismo, Carl?
Tismo examples, the ones that are popular right now are there are things like let's see. On the way to Mount Hood, if you go down Powell Boulevard, they implemented what's called adaptive traffic signal control. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that signals are smart enough to know how many cars are on the street right now, and they adjust in real time. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have these situations where, because traffic engineers, they set it up and so that a certain group of cars can get all the way through on what's called a green band. Well, the way those normally get set up is they do counts for a while, then they take averages, and then they figure that out. And the problem is when traffic goes up and down on either side of that average, there's a lot of kind of unused space. And so a way to make that more efficient is you make the signals understand what's going on right now and adjust accordingly. And that's worked well. I think they reduced delay. They did a before and after study and reduced delay by about 10%. Which on that corridor is kind of a big deal because it's a very heavily used corridor, especially on Friday nights. So that's one idea, smart traffic signals. The smarter things of traffic control measures like that, ramp meters. There is a day coming when a ramp meter can actually read how congested the freeway is and adjust accordingly instead of running at a fixed rate, which is always kind of an irritating thing when the meters are on and the freeway is clear. Or if the freeway slammed and the meters are still letting cars on it, it's just backing up the ramp and onto the arterial, that kind of a thing. So those kinds of things are coming. Those are the first things to be coming. Beyond that, there's things about traveler information that's coming soon. The nice part about working in the realm of a 20-year plan is you can think about, well, let's see, it takes about 10 years for a vehicle fleet to turn over. And so when they bring new technologies and you have all these cool things in your car that you now have in your hand, the iPads, the phones, and all that stuff, and you can just talk to your car and you say, I want to go here. It'll know the quickest way to get there, which route to take, what mode to take, when to leave to avoid the most congestion. That'll be kind of a given in the coming years, and that's all relates to people making better decisions about all those things is all about Tismo.
And even both ODOT and Clackamas County have traffic control centers where not all of our signals are hooked up to the counties, but some of the important signals on 99, especially the one at I-205, ODOT can continually monitor that from Portland and see if they need to give more time to the ramp if it's starting to back up onto I-205 or whatever, and those are just wonderful.
Well, that system also is useful for incident monitoring.
Yeah.
Because on the freeways, that's the whole deal. Is you once the incidents happen, you'd like to try to reduce how many times those happen, but people will be people, and they will be
Yes,
they will
you're
be
correct.
doing this, and
Yes,
they will be
you're
doing
correct.
that
Have
instead of
crashes.
driving.
And have crashes.
So that system is good at minimizing the downtime. Because an incident on the freeway can really, well, you guys know about this, but
Yes.
but it's not as simple as it takes away a lane. Say if they put stop, it's more than a lane. It affects the whole flow. In fact, in both directions, it's really
Correct.
You wish you had a wall you could put up. Is what you doesn't quite
Well,
work out.
then what would be the point of slowing down to see what would happen?
Right.
And they can
So-
do pre-planning, like for Blazer games down at the in Portland. They can start controlling the signals around that area to help travel flow in a different
Right.
way than it would on a normal day.
Right.
I find all this stuff really cool, so that's the only reason I'm chatting.
It is
about
cool.
it.
It's interesting because it's out of all those things, it's probably the fastest growing component. And all the technology
All the
is
technology.
turning over so fast about people knowing. You think about where you were, and you're all, I don't know, I won't guess on ages, but say 20 years ago when you're driving, the way you did is you want to go somewhere you're not familiar with, you pulled out an actual paper map and
Actual
unfolded
paper
it.
map. Yep. Uh-huh.
And you said, well, let's see, I'm going to follow this line, and that's the only line that looks like the straightest thing to go, so that's the way I'm going to go,
Yep.
regardless of what traffic is like. Well, those
Yes.
days are kind of over
They
for
are
a lot
way
of people.
over.
For a lot of people, but that just seems second nature now. But it's all that stuff's going to it's going to keep changing in that order of magnitude in other ways, I think.
And can you repeat the TSMO?
TSMO, Transportation System Management and Operations.
When you say, Nancy, that they can look at that intersection and make changes on the 205, is it a person that's doing this, or?
Yes,
Oh, so
they have a
not quite-
traffic.
They haven't got a computer doing that
that's
yet.
what I'm wondering. That would be the
I
best.
think
best
they can
thing.
do it remotely, though. I bet.
They can.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can control all the signals remotely, just like in the TV shows and the movies. Go see these movies where people can, they can do funky things with traffic signals and make all directions green at the same time. Yeah, you can't do that, by the way. But yeah, you can control systems remotely like that. And yeah, the county has one. ODOT has one, and then I think Washington County has one as well. And all that's changing too, because that's all those systems are hardwired; they're fiber optic systems.
Right.
But all that's changing because pretty soon there's going to be a big component that's going to be wireless, so you're going to be able to control systems like that from anywhere in the world. To me, that's kind of freaky.
That's
Well,
kinda
it's just
scary.
a little bit
Yeah.
freaky.
Someone in
Yes.
Holland telling us how to stop and go out here on 99.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, the other thing to talk about freaky on technology is that it's coming very soon that you'll be able to, your car will be able to talk to the car near you. So they'll know when things are slowing rapidly. Your car will adjust without actually seeing the car. The car will be able to alert
Wow.
your other car.
I could use that now.
The same thing, the road will be able to talk to your car. It'll be telling you what the speed limit should be. It'll know what your speed is, and it can advise you accordingly. It'll tell you if there's an incident ahead. I mean, all that stuff is not very far out
speed
there.
things, okay. I don't need that.
I'm ready for it to tell me when there's an uninsured motorist
You're
approaching,
right.
approaching rapidly from behind.
That's great.
So, just a
Personal
little more information, sort of from a city commission standpoint, is Portland State University has a very, very active traffic control interest. Would you say they
Yes.
collect data like it's going out of style?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And
they're
they
one of the-
work closely with Metro then to put all this data together so that we can do a better job of predicting
Right.
transportation around the region. And I bet you can tell us a little bit more about that too, Carl.
A little bit, yeah. There's a program that it's one of the few in the country, frankly, and they're
We're very proud of it.
very proud. Yeah, they basically collect ongoing data from all of the freeway sensors, and then most of I think they're at the point now where most of Portland's signals are on the system. And so all those little loops you see cut in the road, those actually count when cars go by. But historically, all this data gets lost, thrown away, basically. It collects it, and after about 6 months, it says, "Yeah, my data drive's full. I'm going to chuck it and redo it." Those guys actually collect it and archive it and study trends and patterns and those kinds of things.
Oh.
They collect, and so, but you can get at that from the web and look at travel patterns, travel speed, how speed is affected by weather, volume, all those kinds of things that us geeky transportation planners like to get into. And it's a very interesting resource. You can see how travel changes by season, what effect an event on the system happens if there's a crash. You'll be able to see the history behind it.
Right.
It's very, very rich data for
That's
guys
great.
like us.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things will be coming into play more often in more places, but right now Portland's out ahead.
Yeah, they have a really, really successful traffic engineering center there.
I have a question about something to me that is new but extremely irritating.
Okay.
And it's those overhead signs on the freeway that everybody has to stop because they can't read faster than 3 words a minute.
Oh,
And so you get a huge traffic backup because everybody's trying to read the signs.
there's too many words?
Yeah.
The digital ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or especially the ones that have more than one screen.
Yeah.
Boy, it can really throw the freeway into a mess.
Variable message signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
better over to the side, I think.
But I sure like to know when there's a
When
crash
there
that I
is
can
something,
avoid.
so you can adjust.
Right, right. Well, those kind of things, those things are gradually like I said, eventually that kind of information will be straight to your car, right? They won't need to be showing it on a sign
Right.
that you drive under, because those things cost about $1 million to put up.
I bet.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But
Just
it does.
flashcards.
Okay, different way.
And actually, those signs, we use them, they're really good for incident management.
Yes.
And we used them
Right.
even for our 4-day closure. They were all over the region
Yes.
with
Yeah.
Stay
Yeah.
Awake from 213, and people did. So
Yeah. It was good.
anyway, we should probably get on with the TSP.
Oh yeah, never mind. Let's do it. So these are the goals. As Nancy said, these are a lot of the pieces were already in your comp plan, in your transportation system plan. We reorganized them a bit and basically made them line up a little bit more with the latest version of the regional transportation plan, so that you could see a correspondence between your goals and the kind of goals that they had. So we're talking about equitable, as Nancy mentioned, convenience and accessibility to non-motor vehicle modes. Health and safety is now in the mix like I've never seen it before in my career, where health and safety is an outcome of a well-designed transportation system. There was always the public health piece, but they were never really connected to transportation planning. But now that's a direct issue you need to look at. Sustainability in all its flavors, financially, health-wise, longevity, environmental, all those pieces are in there. So what we're doing through this, and I mentioned this briefly before, is we're taking those kind of leading notions, and then we're trying to figure out a way to measure some of them. That's why we come up with the evaluation criteria. And so when we go through and we look at options, in the few cases where we have options, we use it to see how we can best meet most of those goals with a solution. That's what we mean by performance-based planning, and that's kind of what's markedly different about this TSP update.
Can we just ask them, how do those goals look to you? Are there any objectionable concepts or words up there for this city commission?
Not that I see at a quick glance.
The other thing that stressed a little bit more in this TSP than the last one, and in this RTP than the last regional transportation plan, is the economic, prosperous and competitive economy. That was in the previous ones, but it was much stronger for obvious reasons. Because we had such a rough, rocky road
Right.
in those terms. And I would also just add to Carl's discussion about health. For me, it's very, very exciting to see the health aspect. I got all excited when we were linking land use and transportation, and now to see the health aspect being directly linked to transportation too, I
that
just
is
go,
a
my world
huge-
is getting more and more complete.
Yes.
So,
That is huge. Yeah.
Well, it's great at the policy level. As us practitioners are kind of scratching our head at the practical level, like how do you measure that? I mean, how do you predict
Yeah.
that? It's one of those kind of the new and emerging areas. So because I'm gonna, the natural question for any community is, well, okay, if I do this, this, and this, what is the outcome in terms of health benefits?
Yeah.
And I don't think the formula is there yet. I mean,
No.
But it's coming, and there's certainly research underway. In fact, I bet Portland State's probably doing some of it.
And the state is doing some
It
too.
is as well, yeah. So that's coming along. Oh, see, she asked the question, and I hadn't even put it up
You
yet.
had it there.
Yeah. So this is a snapshot of just Oregon City and a little bit of Westland of showing where growth is per the comp plan today. And so this is by 2035. So the scale of the circle is more growth. Red is housing. Green is jobs. And most of the growth of one sort or the other pretty much lines up with your current comp plan locations. The regional center, obviously, there, the big green circle at the top is another one. And then that development out there on, well, it's not on Maple Lane, but it's near Maple Lane.
Park Place.
Park Place.
Urban Growth
Well,
Boundary Expansion.
No, that's up to the
Beaver
north.
Creek.
That's up by
Oh,
Holcomb.
Beaver Creek.
No, the other one. Oh, there's Beaver Creek. There's the one in the middle
Oh, off
This
of
one.
Mole. Oh,
That's not
It's good
South End.
I
size.
think there's
No.
just vacant land out there.
That
hasn't
is,
been
yeah.
Okay,
developed.
well, so you can see, so comment number one is there's a good level of growth expected on the kind of the periphery of the city. The internal piece is pretty well built. Comment number two is what you're not seeing on this map is there's a lot of growth outside the city that's actually adding significant volume to mainly the state highways, so mainly 213, 205, and 99. So when we looked at where the growth is coming from, a lot of it's not coming from the city. So that's just the reality of the way it is, and we as analysts have to help see what options we can give you to change your safety or access to those state highway facilities. But part of that is, in the bigger picture, the state has to figure out a way to manage that in total.
so this is if 2035 comes to reality.
I'm hoping it does. If we actually get to
This is a
2035.
projection.
This is a projection, like I said, with your current, with the current growth rate because Metro re-looked at the growth rate last year, no, the year before, shortly after the recession really hit bottom, because 10 years ago, back when you were doing the current TSP, I think the growth rates in this sector of the metro area were a little bit more ambitious.
Right.
And those things got scaled back, not just for your area, but for all areas, so that what used to be, 2030 not long ago starts to look a lot more like 2045 or 2050 kind of a thing. And so if you really core down and look at the details, you'd see a few cases where in the prior plan there was big congestion and big growth problems, and that's less so now in a few locations. That in particular is the one that we've been talking about in the last few days is 213 at Beaver Creek. What to do at 213 and Beaver Creek is a question that we have to answer. Because there's been one solution, your old TSP, your current TSP, if you're familiar with it, is interchange there. That's the solution. The question is, does it stay in interchange or we do something different? Because interchanges are big and obtrusive and expensive.
And we
That-
actually took it out of the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan.
Yes, it's not in the RTP, but the widening of 213 to the north isn't. It's still in the RTP, although it's not in the fiscally constrained version.
Yeah, and what we are trying to do is be as realistic as we can be with this transportation model.
Right.
And Metro has a very, very sophisticated model, and but I was really glad to see that they scaled it back based on real observations, based on, predominantly because of the economy. And they're even doing another model that's even has better, more accurate data in it. But we're behind. I mean, they won't have that information out for a while. So since we're already in the process, we've been approved to use this beta modeling that they did a couple years ago.
I've got a question here about this section along 99E, that just outside the city limits. That seems to be very low to me as far as job increase. Yes,
You're expecting more outside the city limits there?
I'm expecting a lot down there.
Okay.
Is it inside the UGB, Laura?
It is, I believe.
Yeah.
Purple line will be UGB.
Yeah.
which is where those businesses are along there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But it's got rail, it's got river, it's got the road, it's got a lot of things going for it as far as.
Zone for like industrial or something?
Yeah. But those will probably go up when we have the concept plan for that, though, which is
that-
early.
It's, if it's not in the urban growth boundary yet, Metro's assuming the existing county zoning out there, which probably may not reflect some of the ideas you have for that
Right.
particular area. And in fact, before we can expand the UGB these days, we have to do the concept planning first. So, and that all takes quite a bit of time. So it could be by the next TSP, we'll have a something that's more official for that area that would enable us to take some of your thoughts into mind.
And then the other question I have is about Kanema itself, I guess the 99E stretch of Kanema.
Right.
Something definitely needs to be done about that area. It's dangerous.
In terms of access to
to,
that area?
to pedestrians, right? It's
Right.
Well,
I know
they're
they're
changing
restriping
it. Yeah,
it.
they're restriping it to take it to 3 lanes,
Right.
2 going northbound and 1 going southbound, I believe. Or is it vice versa?
I'm not sure which, but there's at least the long last there'll be a turn pocket.
Yes, with a turn pocket, and then they're also
That's
adding
what
bike lanes.
really has been missing is a turn pocket.
Yes,
Are there
that is.
sidewalks all the way through that?
Well, have we identified those in the TSP yet?
Yeah, I think there's gaps. I don't think there's any existing sidewalks, right?
No.
There's a lot of non-sidewalks there. It's mostly shoulders, I think.
And something that we can't do within the scope of the TSP, but I might suggest is a recommendation for a project to include in the TSP would be to do a quarter study for that section of Highway 99E and involve the neighborhood, involve ODOT. And that's the kind of, we could almost apply for a TGM grant to do something like that in the future. But that would be, we wouldn't use this TSP to identify specific improvements
Right.
other than calling it out as an area that really needs to be paid attention to and
Right.
more planning done for it. Because I agree with you. If it's and we made some progress with their paving project. They're
Right.
changing the configuration of the road, which should make it a little bit safer.
And traffic calming, too. People just see that as an extension
Yeah,
of
it's-
the 99
Yes.
fast
Yeah.
Yeah.
track there.
So, we talked about this at our office today, this $10 million. So the city, frankly, the city is doing a really good job, I think, in terms of the way it collects money to serve transportation growth. The $10 million number there is, they're collecting a lot more than that, at least if growth comes. But that is an amount that's related to a recent gas tax increase. So I guess I would call that uncommitted $10 million. It's not like you don't have other money sitting around, but
Well, and we always have more needs in our street department for operations.
Right.
right.
So it's hard to say that for sure. I mean, that 10 million could be easily used for other
Sure.
operating expenses.
Well, it could be used for other operating
Maintenance, yeah.
expenses, and frankly, and you're probably all familiar with this, with our transportation SDCs, the fee that's collected doesn't fully fund all the projects.
Correct.
And so there's a gap there, and certainly that could go to part of that. I mean, that would be one
So,
option.
Carl, when you say that, could you explain it? Why doesn't the SGC collected fund all the projects?
Well, I should
Or
be...
an entire project?
Well, I mean, the main reason I'm thinking of, and I think it's what I mentioned last night, was, I mean, a lot of times from a technical point of view, you can fund, you take the total cost of all the projects, you take all the growth, you divide, you come up with a cost per home, basically, for a common denominator. And a lot of times that cost is more than that community thinks is a fair market price. You know, they take their SDCs for all the different utilities, they add it up, and they want to be basically not very different than the communities nearby them.
Right.
And so you'll end up setting a rate at what I would call, you know, a kind of a policy level rather than a technical level.
Right.
And so what happens is less projects get built out of the total list over time, or the other way of looking at it is you're able to build less infrastructure for growth than you have in your plan.
Unless we can figure out a way to fund the gap.
Yes.
That's the big challenge.
Yes.
The other reason, besides the policy or political sort of reality of that, though, is that when we say if we need to, if we have a project in the TSP that's for growth, and to say what should we do? Add sidewalks, add bike lanes, whatever. The existing, sometimes things have to be done to the existing road that don't have anything to do with growth. Like, for example, you might have to rebuild the roadway section for 3 of the lanes, but now you need a 4th, and the road's not in good condition. And that part of the project, the part that's just to improve an existing facility, you cannot charge developers for. And that's the big gap, and that's something that
That's true.
Betty can tell you more about what we talked about at C4, but that's another thing is there's that, and so as much as we like growth to pay its way, there's actually statutorial limitations on how much we can charge them.
This 10 million, where does that come from?
I believe it's from the recent change in gas tax monies collected
Yes.
by
But
the city.
I guess what I'm asking is who figured it out? Is it what's behind my question is electricity and cars, the alternative fuel choices that we're coming to, and
Well, that's a good point. I don't think we adjusted for changes in the vehicle fleet, taking in less gas
Right.
per car. This is just based on historical trends per capita.
that
You know.
seems to me would be a big change.
It could, but fair enough. That's a fair comment. My comment to the Planning Commission last night was that's a very small number, 10 million. For a 20-year plan, that is
Yeah, it's very small.
that's
right.
changing the sofa almost. I
Right.
mean, that's that's
It's a lot for us.
kind of joking, but
Well, I think
know.
what was our total? Oh my gosh, it was 150. No, I'll let you know. But there's the total of projects in the existing capital improvement project for transportation is just astronomical.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's a big
It is
number.
changing the sofa.
Right. And so, I agree with your comment. The fleet's going to change. I mean, as you read in the paper over the weekend, the
I was going to
state's thinking about changing the way it collects money,
the mileage.
going to mileage instead of just a per gallon charge. They're still fine tuning that. I like their new approach. If you read the article, about making the decision makers and legislators test it. I think that'd be great.
I think that would be great.
I have a question for you, kind of a technical one. We were on a freeway recently in Texas that it was a tollway, and it read from the car.
Yes.
I didn't know I was on a tollway and got a ticket when I got home.
Bummer.
But what about cars that aren't equipped with that type of device, that right type of reading?
Yeah.
Well, in Chicago, there's actually separate booths for those that don't have the.
But there's no booths on
They
this
don't have
freeway.
anything.
You just keep going.
Yeah, all
and
the,
all
all
of a
the
sudden
new
it's-
freeways don't have booths anymore. There's no
No,
booths.
you don't know you're on a toll road.
That's how they make more money.
Well, like
For their
5
city.
miles back.
You can buy V passes too that you put in your car. So maybe
Right.
that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And in general, though, there's these little devices that are about this big, and it's all done by radio frequency.
And it's in your car already.
It's in your car already. Depending on where you are, they're now getting to the point where they're going to starting to distribute those at like 7-Elevens.
Yeah.
So you can buy them easily.
Yeah.
You just put them in your car and go off and do that. I'm kind of surprised though it wasn't marked though. Usually
It
those
was
things are
way,
pretty
way
well-
back.
Oh,
But
I
I
see.
forgot by the time I got there.
I see.
But what I'm thinking is if they are going to be collecting funds off of these kind of devices, what do you do with an old car that doesn't
Buy a
that's the
little
thing is-
7-Eleven.
They need to be retrofitted some way. I mean, that was a challenge. They did a pilot program like this in 2005, and the technology was kind of expensive, and the overhead for administrative was kind of high. That was kind of the outcome. And I don't know where they're at now. I assume the technology is a lot cheaper. The challenge is that the administrative overhead for collecting funds the way they do now is just tiny.
Yes.
And so it's kind of hard to compete with that, where it's less than 1%, I think, is the number. So we'll see where that ends up.
Thank you.
So the obvious list of options to think about, obviously when you revisit the list of projects that are on the are eligible for SDC funding, you may reconsider the fees associated with that. The city already has a utility fee right now. All those monies are dedicated to pavement. There are options to, it's within your realm to change the kind of things that are funded through the utility fee. There's no state regulation that would limit you. You have to amend the resolution that implements that, but you could spend it on, anything you care to related to the transportation system. So a lot of cities avoid that pitfall.
Oh, definitely so.
My thinking is one potential candidate is things that aren't motor related, fed bike improvements, sidewalk gap fills, those kinds of things. Something that's it's a limited range of improvements and a limited dollar amount instead of a big kind of open possible. But anyway, that's something we'll be talking about and considering as we go ahead, and you guys tell us
I could tell
whether
you
it makes
that.
any sense.
I wouldn't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay.
There's not a
Because-
surplus of money anyway, so.
And I just don't think I strongly would not do that. We've got a good system going.
We do. Yeah.
And
I like
I haven't
it.
heard a lot of complaints lately, so
Okay.
maintain.
All right. Keep on course. Got it.
Yes,
All right.
for that one.
Let's see. So you're probably familiar with maps like this. This is called a multimodal street system. We typically used to call it the street functional class map. The difference here is you still have those designations, freeway, expressway, arterials, and collectors. But now we're kind of layering on one piece over the top of that to think about what context the streets are in, specifically what land uses they're next to. And we have kind of a much more flexible design type matrix set up that I'm not going to show you, but basically you can change the scale and the amenities of the street to not only align with the functional class, but also with the adjoining land use. So in cases where you have an arterial and it's near mixed use development or retail development, maybe things that you would normally not consider on an arterial, like on-street parking, become viable.
Become an option.
Become an option,
Sure.
depending on right-of-way availability and all those kinds of things. So we're characterizing what was called complete street design standards now, kind of in this way of thinking. So you have those discrete zones, the walking zone, the bike on-street parking, and driving zones. And each of those are flexible. This is kind of the full meal deal. So we're not saying,
It looks like a dog, but I think it's a bush.
that's a median, it's not a dog.
It's not a dog.
It's a planted median, I believe. It's probably a bioswale, for all I know.
It's, kind of a bushy kind of thing.
Yeah, and so,
Could be
these are all the pieces, that doesn't fit for all contexts, but if you played everything, this could be one particular configuration. And obviously, you got to be sensitive and reasonable what the right-of-way requirements would be.
Absolutely.
But, such things like this, this is a cycle track. You maybe have seen them in Portland, where the bikes are on the other side of the cars.
Yeah,
And man, the bicyclists can fly down that thing. It's just amazing.
they do.
Much
They do.
Yeah.
Now, my first question when anybody brings it up is how are we going to sweep that? So, John, you can look for a new street sweeper. Maybe the cycle
Well,
tracks.
this one's odd. I mean, this picture actually has a median there, but none of the ones in Portland have a median.
They
It's
just have like
it's
a
just paint.
paint.
It's
Yeah.
just paint.
So you just wait till off hours and you just go through and sweep it like normal.
Yeah, but it's that raised paint.
Oh, it's the thicker, whatever that fancy name is for the paint.
Over in the Laurelhurst area,
Yeah.
it's like that.
It feels you can feel the bumps when you drive across it, but it's still just a plastic.
And there's also versions where they have a raised bike lane and then a raised sidewalk, so that really creates a different, sort of really demarks your area very well.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of a European thing, whereas there's about a 2-inch lift there. And again, the maintenance guys ask the same question: how you got to keep that clean? I've seen the elevation difference, and then sometimes they use colored pavement, that kind of a thing. Anyway, so we're just trying to give the city kind of the ability to mix and match, to fit not only the intent of the street, but also the character or the context of the land use next to it.
So I wanted to use this slide to illustrate that whole approach, and what you'll find in the particular technical memo on this is that for the different land use categories, we have different street elements that should be used to create the street that goes with that land use. And for example, this street, which has on-street parking, the on-street parking would not be considered a high priority if you were in an industrial zone, because usually in an industrial zone you have a nice big parking lot right around the building.
Right.
And so in the TSP, there is a chart that shows what it really rates the elements in terms of most important to least important for our different land use types. And this is a new approach.
It is.
And it really does, I think it's great because it's trying to prescribe a street that is most comfortable for the users considering the adjacent land uses, and I think it can add to livability of
Right.
Oregon City in the long run.
Okay. Makes sense so far? All right, so other pieces, block sizes, minimums, maximums. We're looking at what the city code currently provides and recommending changes as needed to make sure that you have, where you can, reasonable spacing for peds and bikes to get through a neighborhood, to reduce the amount of out of direction travel, and it's all for convenience and safety reasons for the most part. Same with driveway spacing standards. I don't believe the city has those, not that we found, but maybe Laura can correct me on that. But they have street spacing standards. We found that, but we can't seem to find driveway spacing standards. So on the higher class streets with higher operating speeds for the vehicles, longer spacing between driveways, the better for lots of reasons. Not just for vehicle to vehicle, but if you've ever, with lots of driveways and lots of pedestrian traffic is not a good combination either. People walking through driveways
Right.
is not really what you want in a commercial area if you can avoid it. So those are all things we're going to look through what the city has now and make recommendations as appropriate. Oops, missed one.
And in the regional transportation plan, they have recommendations for the spacing of all the different levels of streets, including freeways and
Yeah.
including rail corridors, et cetera.
Right.
And we're just trying to figure out where we fit in with that, because we're not a
Yeah.
blank slate. We've got what we got.
I was gonna, yeah.
And then, but one of the requirements of the grant is to make sure that we have good connectivity in our regional center. And so there has been a fair amount of focus on what does a potential grid system look like in the undeveloped parts of the regional center.
Right, and Nancy did mention that all this work is being paid for by an ODOT grant. He's from the consultant side of it. I'm not sure if it pays for your guys' time or not, but well, maybe it does. I can't recall.
No,
I didn't think so.
We had a small local match.
So all these dimensions come into play when you get down to site development and review. There'll be kind of new criteria that the city staff will be looking for when the applications come forward.
Okay.
So here is the next notion that we're introducing now, this thing called neighborhood greenways. This is kind of another layer of connections, so you've got your bike facilities that are on the bigger class streets, the arterials and the collectors. This layer thing called neighborhood greenways is really targeted toward the lower class streets, lower volumes, lower speeds. It's kind of a backup system for the major streets. And so we've got some illustrations there of what some of those look like locally. The basic idea on these streets is to provide a little bit more priority for bikes and pedestrians and a little less for autos. So there's a number of different ways you can invoke that, but I think I've got a map on the next slide. This is kind of the working diagram at this point, and the majority of these streets, a lot of these streets are local streets or lower class streets. I think Holly Street's not a local street, but you get the idea. These are not the big, fast, high volume streets.
Right.
These are ways to get around town, got to be more comfortable and convenient. So we're putting this out there to get feedback, and some of these ideas haven't really been, we haven't got responses back from the staff yet. to see where they fall on this. And part of this will be in the open house process next week. We'll be looking for feedback about these kind of connections, where they make sense and where they don't make sense. But I like the notion of having a two-tier system, not just the major streets, but what I'd call more neighborhood kind of connections. And some of those are reflective of the concept plans, like in the Beaver Creek and Park Place. I mean, we pulled pieces out of those plans and put it in here, and trail systems in here, and connected the dots in a few other cases. But
So the dark green is the current system that we have. And the light green is what you're proposing as a trail, or?
light green are trails, definitely. The darker green are, for the most part, well,
The
yeah,
light green are existing trails
right.
Okay.
or multi-use paths, multi-purpose.
And the darker green are, many of those are already existing streets, but we're talking about how you might change the treatment on those existing streets. So not all these are new routes or new facilities. These are mostly be kind of redoing the treatment on existing streets, like Holly. I mean, Holly's an existing street.
But it's not marked for other modes of transportation.
Uh-uh.
I think so.
I don't see it.
See which?
The Holly Street?
Holly Lane, that's on the
Holly
way,
Lane,
way
that's-
on the
that's
right.
the elbow
Let's pick
here.
one that's in town, like
Yeah.
Leland.
Leland.
Let's see, where's Leland?
It
doesn't
should
have
be.
a
There it
bike
is.
lane.
Right over.
It doesn't have a bike lane,
Leland.
but
Yeah.
it has, like, when they redid the pavement, it does have
Has a little bigger shoulder.
a little side.
And I think the idea there would be to even expand on that. Maybe add signage or additional pavement markings that, and maybe that's not a perfect example, but maybe even a lower level street would be even a better example. But the idea is to make it more and more aware for the motorists to know that they can expect to share the road with bicycles and pedestrians. And so let's all be friendly instead of thinking that one person, even though it's a 2,000-pound vehicle going 35 miles an hour, has necessarily the priority. To make it more comfortable for other users.
So any thoughts or reaction about that at the concept level, about having kind of a second tier? Now, I know on this one there's a few places that we've flagged where there's some kind of terrain issues about getting from point A to point B.
Yeah,
There's some slope issues.
yes, yes.
So it
So,
may not be a straight line. It may be more of one of these kind of things.
Yeah, and we also talked at the Planning Commission yesterday about making sure that you think about these not necessarily going the entire way across the city, but maybe you're just going part way, and does it work for part way? And trying to figure out if it makes more sense to do it by the level of the city, or at least think in terms of, well, this may not mean you go all the way downtown and back up to Park Place just because there's a green line there. I mean, but you can use parts of it depending where you are.
Well, the other thing we're going to be doing for the upcoming meeting series is kind of overlaying the other bike and ped system maps on top of this. We're kind of looking for seeing where if you just did the major street systems, where the city's weaker, where there's less connection for bikes and peds, and then maybe these kinds of things would have more value in that piece of city. Because I look at this and I as a planner, I'm struggling a little bit because I want to kind of break it up into pieces and figure out which one's the highest priority.
Right.
'Cause you're not going to do it all at once, and
Right.
so you want to figure out which, from a connectivity and safety point of view, is the kind of what I would call the weaker or less. That you need more help in that part of the city than others.
so would you envision seeing something on a road, just choose a road, whichever one you want to choose, and say, cars, you have to share the road, so you're going to change the road, and it's going to look like this?
Just show one of those pictures.
See how.
Is that what you're visualizing for those?
And you might create
dark
green boxes, like they have in downtown Portland, that says bikes have a priority at this intersection. It's adding other reminders that there are other modes using the road.
So a lot of the stuff that you're seeing in the images here, it's just signing and pavement marking and that kind of a thing. They're not radical changes. but it's more of a trying to designate those as routes that can be used and will be used. And a lot of stuff that goes with that is the educational piece. Getting people to understand what those are about and why they are the way they are. I mean, you can take it beyond this in cases where you've got routing choices like where you have the grid.
Right.
You can do things if you've been in the streets parallel to Hawthorne and those kinds of things. There's on both sides. There's usually routes that are really more set up for bikes and pedestrians than they are for cars, and they do that by actually putting physical planters in the middle of the road.
And roundabouts.
Cars can get through, but they kind of have to veer around them a little bit. The bikes just go right through. It's porous for bikes, but it's a little bit more of a circuitous thing for cars. That would make sense in a limited case here in the city because you really don't have that many situations where you have a good
Because
set
some of these
options.
roads are already really tight to get a
Right.
car
Right.
down, and then if you put something like in the middle of the road or something,
Right. That wouldn't
I
have
mean, that just would
application.
not make sense.
Yeah, fair enough.
The other
do that.
thing we talked about is how intuitive it is to use the hilltop neighborhoods are much more bike friendly than
Right.
some of the steep parts of the city, and then maybe that would be a priority for connecting some of the neighborhoods to destinations like shopping, services, doctor, et
So
cetera.
it'd be kind of a case by case kind of basis, depending
Yeah.
upon neighborhood and money.
Do these go to one way? Am I reading that correctly? To
No,
get enough
no,
width in
no.
that
You're
street,
not. You're
or-
not changing them to one way.
No.
And then you also
Well, I
have to-
mean, in that case, in the bottom photo, that is the case there, but that's not what
That's
we're
not what
recommending as a
that's-
general.
yeah.
Okay.
Again, that's a Portland situation where they've got
Right.
a grid. They've got 300-foot blocks.
Right.
Well, the other part of this that I'm thinking about is like, especially here in the historic district, you got really narrow streets, and people don't have driveways. A lot of people don't have, off-street
Park on the
parking.
street.
And then park on the street.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Certainly something
So
to
it's
consider.
definitely a it depends situation.
Yes.
There's no one size fits all.
Right.
And, oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, for the commission, those first two questions are going to be really important
Yes.
because it's really about your values and how you think that those will fit in Oregon City.
Right.
I'm not sure what the research shows, but I'm curious myself about designing bike facilities that are more specialized like that to make it safer. Doesn't necessarily mean that cyclists stop for stop signs
Right.
and other traffic laws that they don't.
Right.
Well, at least a lot of the ones I see don't follow them, and so I would like to think that if we're going to build facilities for that over time, the cycling community the norms would change so that it's more the exception than the rule that you see people ignoring traffic laws on
Right.
bicycles.
Right.
Education. So would this be instead of bike lanes or in
No,
addition
it's a complement to it.
Okay, so it's just letting people know to expect cyclists on the
Right.
road.
Like I said, I mean, I think at the master plan level, it's a good idea. I think from a practitioner's point of view, we have to think about what piece of the city makes the most sense
Right.
in the early stages, and what might that look like for the
Yeah.
streets that are there.
Absolutely.
And we might even tie it into our pavement management program, where if we're doing
True, when you're doing a
if we're doing
repavement job.
pavement maintenance, that's a good time to look at if we're going to be restriping anyway. There's a lot of things to take into account.
Think about.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and maybe routes to specific places like the college and library and
Sure.
such like that.
But yeah, there's a whole realm of riders that really don't want to ride on the major streets.
Right.
Pretty much as if they can avoid it.
Yeah.
They'd much rather be somewhere else.
Well, it's much prettier in the neighborhoods.
Yes.
And safer.
Yeah, all those things.
And hopefully these are lower volume roads,
Right.
less traffic, slower
That's the
speeds.
intent, is we tried to pick ones with relatively low volumes.
I know what I was going to say, and you want to make sure that you're not setting up a situation where people are cutting through because they want to avoid that street that's not quite as car friendly anymore, and so they start using somebody else's road. I mean, those
Right.
are all
True.
things
You don't want to
consider.
displace cars.
Because we looked at that a long time ago.
Yes.
When we were considering where speed bumps go,
Yes.
and where we took a couple out, I think too.
I think so.
Okay.
Commissioner Mum was on the Transportation Advisory Committee for many years
Yes.
before she became a commissioner.
Yeah, they're not speed bumps anymore, they're speed cushions.
Oh.
Kidding.
I know you are.
Speed
humps. Yeah.
Depends on the construction.
Well, at a minimum, what they do now is they don't span the whole road. They're rectangular,
Right.
So you can drive through them. The emergency vehicles can drive through them
Yeah.
without hitting them.
Without-
And motorcyclists and bicycles, they don't go in the humps. But
Yeah.
yeah, the Europeans call those speed cushions.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they
I've
do.
never heard that.
Like they know those Europeans.
There you go.
So next one, this is one we spent a bit of time on last night with the Planning Commission, alternate street standards for city streets. As a region, everybody's realizing that we don't have the funds to provide the mobility for those few hours a day that we would like. And so we're relooking at what we call acceptable levels of congestion. And in terms of where the city's at now, if you have, for example, an intersection that's controlled by a signal, and the development comes in, you're going to ask them to do a study, and you're going to say, what we'd like to see is no less than that item on the left there, the level of service to you. Now, I'm assuming you three are familiar with level of service and volume capacity ratio and all those lovely things. That's true, yes? No, you're not? Okay. So level of service, it's a way of expressing how much congestion at an intersection. That particular style of doing it uses letter grades. It's an unfortunate comparison because it reminds you of school and how you did poorly in school.
Letter F.
Yeah, letter F and letter E. Well, I don't have E in school, but still, I always wish they used fruits or animals or something, but
Yes.
they ended up with letters.
It works fine.
The numeric equivalent to that is when you're at capacity for that 1 hour period, you're at a number of 1.00. So when you're planning your system and you're saying that I can accept up to 0.99, you're essentially at capacity, basically. And so what this says is that as a region, that's going to be their new standard. And well, frankly, that's been their standard for quite a while now. So they can, for an hour or two or three a day, they can accept complete capacity, and then it will lessen thereafter. And so if the city were to consider something like that, that would mean during the busiest hours of the day, if you grow like you expect and all your neighboring cities grow like they expect, you would accept more delay at all kinds of intersections. So these are kind of the numeric framework for expressing that. I think Nancy asked me the question last night at a intersection that's not controlled by a signal. I went into a little trivia thing there, but when you come up with a rating at an unsignalized intersection, what you're expressing is the delay for the side street, how long it takes to turn onto the major street. You're not expressing at all what's going on the major street at all. So the rating is just for those few cars that are trying to make the left out onto the major street. So when you go from a D or an E to this 0.99, you're forcing on them longer waits. There is a safety implication there a little bit. Sometimes people do crazy things when they have to wait longer. We're hoping that over time, if that's a recurring problem, that they'll figure out, go a different way, go a different time of day, do something different. In a few cases, we'll be able to recommend solutions. You know, if it's a high enough volume on the side street, we could recommend different types of traffic control at the intersection. You know, there's certain cases where you can go from a two-way stop to a four-way stop,
Right.
and really kind of deal with your problem to some degree. So we're just pushing this out there that this will be one of the findings we'll be looking for in this TSP update, is changing the bar for city facilities. Now, certainly ODOT has their own bars, and they're frankly at that point already. They're already at 0.99, with a few exceptions as noted below. In the regional center, you can actually, I always love this as a traffic engineer, when you say you can get 1.0, 1.1 volume capacity ratio, so that means you got 10% more cars than a cup can carry. It's all in the future, right? It's not a present day thing. But in reality, if you were actually to go out and count any intersection in the metro area, it can't go over 1.0. It physically can't happen. Because what you're doing is you're counting how many cars go through the intersection during that hour, not the cars that are stacking up on either side of the intersection.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting this out there. This is something we'll be asking you and the Planning Commission to weigh in on and agree or disagree with. But it's the same principle where we have less to spend. We're putting more emphasis on other things and providing mobility for 2 or 3 hours a day. We're focusing more of our money on other modes and other kinds of issues. And so one way that the regions asked us to get at that is to reconsider these mobility standards in
So,
an official format.
just to stress then, that means that there would be more congestion,
More congestion.
more delay, more complaints, more calls to you. Why aren't you fixing that intersection? And the idea is being, well, we've weighed in on this, and you may or may not, but you may say, yes, we looked at this from a high-level policy standpoint for the city of Oregon City, and determined that there were other priorities to spend our money on, and there wasn't enough money. And we also didn't necessarily want gigantuous intersections everywhere or at that location, which are far less pedestrian friendly. It's harder to get across all the way. People with disabilities have a hard time getting across a big wide intersection. And all of these things put together made us decide it was best for the city that this was the most reasonable thing to do. You may take the other, but that's kind of, this is a pretty significant policy for the city.
It is. It's a big shift for a lot of cities.
And you're not alone. Other cities throughout the region are facing the same decisions.
Yeah. So Nancy articulated some of these things, but it'll change the way your development review process goes because there'll be a different standard applied. It'll allow the city to grow more without spending as much. Let's see. In theory, it frees up your capital monies to do other things than add a left turn pocket at an intersection because for a few hours a day you need it. But it certainly follows the last bullet about being more sustainable in terms of doing other things, minimizing your footprint, all those kinds of things. I want to pause there for a minute and let you think on that and maybe talk a little bit about where that sits with you.
It kind of sounds like we're trying to get people out of their cars into bikes and ped, which I get, but people are typically not going to give up their cars, and that's going to be the nature of the beast. So I don't know how I feel about this.
I don't think I would prefer to have more complaints about congestion than I already
Yes.
get. I guess for every city it depends because some cities have a lot of congestion. Some have just a little. And so when you say more, I'm assuming that means more than what we have today.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
if you're on 217 or 26, they're not here, but if you were on those roads in the metro, I don't know what more would look like.
Every day. Every day.
And if
You know.
you're not planning for that increase and doing it in little bits, then all of a sudden you have a situation where you have to try to, get up to speed, and it takes a lot of time to do that. So.
And hopefully with this transportation plan, we're also doing a lot of other things to change the demand on the system. That does provide more opportunities for doing things differently, and but yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, well, I don't know what I can say to make it any more comfortable for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a harsh reality. So I think we gave you the example last night. So if you've got if they're you in the universe, in the middle of the universe is a traffic signal, you're coming up to it, in a level of service D world, you probably get through that signal in all cases in one
Right.
cycle. If you're going to level of service E or volume has to be a 0.90, you'll probably most of the time do that, but sometimes you'll have to sit through 2. Once you get higher than that, the likelihood of making it through a 1 goes down, all things equal. So, that's what we mean by more delay. You're going to have to wait longer to get where you want to go.
So another comment from a funding standpoint is if we want to keep with a lower or I guess higher lower level of service standard.
It's confusing.
If we want to keep with the old level of service standard,
Right.
we know that in this model growth we're anticipating, we're going to have $50 million worth of infrastructure needs. Let's just throw a number out there. And if we go with a different level of service standard, we may have $35 million of improvements needed. And maybe half of those can be funded with system development charges that are really attributable to the growth. So so we have to come up with this money, either
The gap.
and there's a gap. And so is our community willing to pay more to achieve that level of service standard that provides more convenience for them, where they don't have to sit through two traffic signals? Or is it such that we really don't want to put the burden of that kind of financing on our community? And I mean, those are another way to look at it is certain times of the day we have a little inconvenience, but we're also not putting the financial burden on the community. There's a lot of different ways to look at it.
That's a good point, Nancy. And we've done this in other situations where you're having to make a choice like this. We've actually quantified what the dollar differences are, and it can be pretty dramatic. I mean, I think Nancy's shooting low. I think the numbers are a lot higher than that. But
Yeah, I was just
that
using
would
example
help.
numbers.
I mean, if you're looking for a rational reason to make that choice, I mean, there's certainly ways to quantify investment differences, because that's the way we look at this, is you're investing in the system and it's providing a certain performance level. And if you want it really to be a convenient, fast system, you have to spend a lot more money in general. But that'll be true for the city system. That won't be true for the state system, because the state is already in the position where they've already moved the bar. And so, intersections on 205, 213, 99, they're all at that new bar level now. And so all our plans are going to adhere to
What
that.
is the new bar level? Is that the
It's that.
1
It's-
point?
It's the proposed
it's-
standard for us.
It's the proposed standard for you. They're already there. That's for them. That's no change. They've been there for quite a few years now. And so, when I think about it, I think the way the normal driver, they don't necessarily think about who owns the street while they're driving on it. I think a lot of the problems are really on the state highways. There are intersections in the city that are not performing as well as you'd like, but the real bottlenecks are on the state facilities, and that's the standard they are using and will continue to use. So the choice that we're talking about really applies to the city facilities
Right.
only. And maybe that'd be helpful to identify which ones are kind of at that tipping point. Which parts of the city are there, because I think it's a much lower number than you might think.
Yeah, it's really, as I recall the maps, most of these are on the state highway system.
Most are on the state highway system. There's a few in the downtown area that are just off the highway where they're connecting right to the state system, so they're carrying a lot of volume. And in a few cases, they're above the capacity level for the way they're controlled now. Like the new 14th connection it's a popular little route. It'll
Right.
continue to be popular, and as everything grows, it'll be more popular, and it'll be more than a simple two-way stop can serve. Basically, is what we find. So.
I see that state standard that regardless of what the city does, or a number of cities do, that state standard staying where it is going to continue to apply pressure to people to live near their work. And if there's two of them working, it's going to provide additional challenges for them.
Right.
too.
So we're trying to force people into alternative.
It not only encourages people to get out on something other than a car, but it also encourages them, I think, to live as close as they possibly can to work, as if gas prices aren't already doing that.
Or
think they are.
I
to
think
live in a
that's-
neighborhood where you can walk to your services, walk to the grocery store.
I think that's a reality in probably 50 years.
Right.
It's going to be a big shift.
For right now,
People's
for today,
thinking.
it's a huge
Yeah.
problem.
I guess I would just
Or
add
you can
one
go a
thing.
different time of day. I mean, there's lots
Right.
of things that drive less, save more. You know, there's all kinds
Yeah.
of carpooling and.
And I think
Sorry,
that,
Tony.
and that's one thing we do look at is that, are there different times, because you're talking about making these large investments for 4 to 5 hours of the day. The other 19 to 20 hours, you have more capacity than you know to do with. But, the other part of this, too, especially in our downtown, where it's located next to 205, 213, and 99E,
Right.
what that does is it makes it very, very difficult to realize our regional center goal and vision.
Right.
And so that's another part to think about this, is that, I'm sure that they have the numbers of how many of those trips start or stop in Oregon City, but because it's in our city limits, it becomes our issue to deal with. And what that does is it makes it very difficult to develop to the densities and the uses that we want to see in our regional center. So the tools that we can give ourselves in those downtowns to realize that vision, to deal with these transportation impacts, and that's a trade-off.
Right.
You're a regional center. This is where you want the density. This is where you want the resources. Are you willing to accept some congestion at that time in those locations? Because what it actually does is it pushes the development out. Because by the time if you have a subdivision that's way out on the edge, by the time the amount of trips get to one of these intersections, they're so low that they really don't trigger anything. There's no proportionality to go after them to fix something.
Right.
But yet they continue to use up capacity because it's much easier to do it farther out. So from a land use standpoint, it really does make it difficult to realize your vision for your downtown.
Well, I know they're working on that specifically because that's a conundrum as us planners know. I mean, you really want the dense development to be downtown, and from our point of view, that's really rather where you'd have the congestion, right? And just figure out a way to work around it.
We have a lot of parking issues down there too. Can you
Yes,
deal
I
with
know.
that?
I know a little bit of history about the downtown parking.
Actually, Carl did the circulation study downtown, so he's very familiar with it
Familiar.
now.
Familiar. So what I was saying is the state was basically recently revised some of their planning rules to allow a bit more flexibility in adding mixed-use developments in the downtown areas and get around some of these numerical bars. That's a problem all around the state. I think Eugene is the one that pushed it the hardest. They wanted to build in their downtown, but these kind of metrics prohibited from doing it.
So basically, if we're going to continue to be a regional center, we have to just kind of adapt, accept this.
I don't know that I'd put those two together, but I mean, for 99E, I mean those are the standards, and they've been that way for quite a while now.
Right.
I don't know how it connects to the regional center piece, but I guess what we could bring back to you is, like we said, locations of pieces of the system that are just the cities that are at that threshold where it's
That would be
above
good.
where it's above your current
Yeah.
standard, and where if you don't make the leap, here's the kind of thing you'd
Yeah.
be looking at to do it.
That would be very good for me.
Okay.
How does mass transit affect all this?
Well, it certainly has an effect, and that's included in the forecasting piece we do. There's certain number of trips that are made on transit or bikes or walking or those kinds of things. That's all in the background. This is just measuring what motor vehicles are on the road, and so the question you're asking is, if we dial up the needle on mass transit, will that solve the problem to some degree? Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking? Yeah, we're basically taking into account the investment that TriMets have already identified for the long term. So we're not looking at radical changes in the scale of transit in Oregon City. I mean, we're having an active discussion right now with TriMet about trying to figure out how to fill in some of the services they used to have.
Yeah.
I mean, what will it take to make that happen? In certain parts of the city really are grossly underserved when it comes to transit. And so we're trying to figure out what it's going to take, what the city can do and cannot do to make that happen, because ultimately it's going to be a TriMet decision where they're going to serve their own agency. So that's a factor. I mean, more transit can be effective. From a planner's point of view, I've come to embrace the notion of changing travel patterns by time. I'm luckily work for an employer that has flexibility. People in our office can come to work anytime between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. So it's just not that big a deal
But
when you
if
show
you're in a
up.
situation where you have to be to work at 8 o'clock and you have to go from Oregon City to Beaverton, you have no option.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, to me,
So I'd hate to put more congestion on the road for these people.
the campaign is less on building more facilities, but more on working with the employers
Yeah.
to give their staff the flexibility. I mean, that is a much easier fix financially than let's expand all the highways connecting those 2 points. I mean, from
And
an economist's point of view, that's the way you go at it.
That was just an example, but it would be helpful if I could see the intersections that
Sure.
are in the city that would actually be affected.
Okay. We can do that. Going past that. Oh, look, we're done. Wow.
Oh, I did have a question.
Okay.
Public input. Where was it advertised for our meeting coming up?
For the open house?
Yes,
Laura?
Long list.
that's good. I like long list of public involvement.
Yeah.
All right, off the top of my head, for the open house, we sent notices to all or most of the city boards, commissions, city facilities, elevator, neighborhood association, CIC, Lloyd Purdy went around downtown and put up flyers today on doors. And then we also dropped flyers at a variety of businesses, including like all the Starbucks, Les Schwab, grocery stores, like Steve's Market, Fred Meyer. What else do we do?
I'm sure you have it on the Oregon City Chamber website and
We emailed it to the chamber.
Yeah. And all the churches.
It's on my list to send to the churches
Okay.
tomorrow, but I have not sent it to the churches yet. We do have it on our website. We did Facebook, Twitter.
That's good.
It was in the Trail News, wasn't it?
I think so.
I don't know if the open house was in the trail. The trail news is a little problematic for
Yeah.
setting a date
Timing,
too far
yeah.
out
Oh,
because we prepared those articles. We had an article about the TSP in the trail news and,
Yeah.
and talked about going to our website where you'd see it. But
Yeah.
though we prepared the articles quite a few months in advance of the publication, so we
Right.
can't always get the dates of specific meetings in.
We also have it on our TSP website, and in May was the second time that we had done it, but we sent a notice out with your water bills, notifying people of the project,
Good.
so they could always go to the project website and see the upcoming meetings as well.
Will it be like at downtown events or concerts in the park? Will there be?
So it will. I've talked to the farmers market. It'll be at the farmers market tomorrow. A couple other meetings this weekend. We'll be at the farmers market on Saturday, just to
Yeah.
both get comments on the TSP and advertise the open house on Monday as well.
That's great.
And we announced it at the CIC, and we're hoping they are the messengers to their.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure if people
Well,
are that
you guys
excited
did
about
a-
this is Laura and I.
You guys did a great job with the bridge advertising to all of the public, and I thought that was a great list. So
So we don't have quite the budget for the public involvement on the TSP.
No, but-
Nancy has this big
List.
email list that we use.
Yeah, we send us all media, different things. If you can think of anything else that we missed, let us know. We'll
that's
send it to
great.
them.
I just, because you're going to always hear, I didn't hear about that. But I'm going to say, no, it was advertised.
It was.
So you should be paying attention. Thank you.
The only thing, concluding remarks I have is we'll be back before you a couple more times before we actually get into the adoption process. That's what's on your
That'd be
screen.
great.
So once we get a better handle on what the right solutions are, where the funding is coming from, and then getting
Yes.
down to implementation. And so I will certainly give you, Commissioner, the feedback on the city locations that are past the tipping point.
Yes.
The only other thing I would mention on that comes to mind just right now is, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's something about eligibility for Metro funding if you
Yeah, I
have
think
a different level service standard.
Yeah.
it affects that somehow.
Yes.
I'm sure it does. Yeah.
Then
I'm
again,
sure it
that you
does.
can still use your money from other places, right? I mean,
It's coming in like, coming in
Hand
floods,
over
like-
fist, right?
Yeah. It's- The money's flooding in.
Not is
Yeah.
correct.
I'm
Not.
just saying, I don't think they'd approve a grant through Metro to build a street to meet a service level standard that's higher than theirs. I think that's where they're going to have a rub.
Yeah, so in the future, there will be the things that get kind of beyond the public works side of it is the implementing ordinances and some zone changes, some zoning code changes. And we'll still be meeting with our stakeholder advisory team. We're meeting with them on Thursday this week. And our technical advisory team, we're meeting them on Thursday this week. So there's quite a bit of meetings that you won't be necessarily directly involved with.
Right, right.
We like to keep you updated.
That's good. Thank
And
you.
I was going to ask Laura just to do a quick run through the website too, so that they could see some of the features there. Hey, Laura,
Laura.
can you do your website demonstration?
Dun, 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 dun.
But start on the city's website, okay? Because I like to start from where
Yeah.
you start from the very beginning,
That's very good. Thank you.
unless you remember www.octransportation.org. No, or transportation plan. I don't remember it, so I.
It's good if you're just,
Transportationplan.org.
if you're just a general person, that's where you want to go. That's where you want to start.
That's not right.
I didn't do it.
This is our city homepage, which is orcity.org.
Familiar with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right now, we try and stay on the homepage as much as possible.
But they probably kick you off regularly, don't they?
They do. As of yesterday, we had our own little icon here for this TSP.
It's like Nancy says, not everybody gets excited about transportation.
Yeah, if something comes along, we try and convince that we're one of the top 5 most important.
Unless they're stuck in traffic, then transportation's high on their list.
So there's various ways to get through it for the website. You can always do the search engine, but we're in this top screen. So we're one of the 5 things that circulate for the TSP update, and then we're
It's also reachable through Public Works, right?
through Public Works. We try and stay updated on the news as well section. So if you go to that page, it'll direct you to our project website page, which is octransportationplan.org. We have a nice little icon that we've created for the project. This is octransportationplan.org. We also, when we go to public events, we've made a little business card with our logo and the website, which people have found to be effective because they just take a full sheet of paper and usually it gets
Yeah.
recycled. Hopefully it gets recycled or
That's
thrown away.
great.
And so those business cards have proven to be helpful. So
And Laura's gone to many other events too, some senior events where
Gone
we're also trying to
to-
do outreach to the senior
Good.
community.
Thank you.
we have neighborhood associations, we've done CIC, we've done a variety of any sort of ODOT projects that there have been or presentations. We're going to one next Tuesday for the 99 paving. We're just going to set up a little booth there too. So with the TSP website, our homepage is just basic information. On the About, you can learn more about the project. It'll talk about why we're updating the TSP, what the TSP is, what our process is. We have a nice little flow chart there. As you know, we're updating it in the form of 12 pieces. So it's a big project, so we grouped it into 12 sections or tech memos. So these summarize what each of those tech memos will be, so you'll know what's coming up next. So if you want to read those tech memos, we have everything on our website because we want to make sure that we're a very transparent process and we get as much public input as possible. So everything we do gets posted online. All of our, they're still draft, obviously, till they're adopted. But everything is on our website. A lot of the tech memos have summaries, so it kind of boils down the more important parts of that.
Yeah.
So you don't have to read the whole 40-page document or whatnot, but we would encourage you to do so.
Little midnight reading.
Yes.
Put you right to
That'll
sleep.
put you right. Solves insomnia.
No problem.
Can I get it on my Nook?
Yeah,
Probably could.
I know. That's what I was wondering.
We also have acronyms and abbreviations, which I think is helpful for this project, since we do tend to have a lot
I
of
think
them.
you're right. Yeah, that's
and,
great.
and at the bottom of this, there's a blog type format, so I can add a question and put it on there. And for example, this question, which was added, was about a tech memo, and then the city posted a response. We worked with Metro to get a response there as well. We have a news feature. We also have a question of the month feature, and you can subscribe to RSS feeds every time we update our website or questions of the month. Our question of the month this month is asking if the public would prefer that we do a large project, fewer large projects, or lots of smaller projects like sidewalk infills, things like that. We haven't had anyone comment on that yet. Hopefully we'll see them come flooding in after all our public
Yeah,
involvement.
we don't get a lot of, I mean, we try.
We try. We tend to see answers to these on our comment map, which I'll show you in a minute as well. We have a Get Involved link that kind of directs you where to go. Also on the Get Involved link, there's another place to do a dialogue or blog type format where someone could post a question, I could respond to their question, or anyone else in the public can kind of talk to each other. There's a document section where we can upload helpful documents, or you can upload helpful documents. Anyone from the public can upload whatever they want. They can mark up our tech memos and then upload it on the website so everyone sees everything for the project. That's in our file uploads. We have our basic contact information. The comment map, I think, is probably the funnest part of the website, other than the tech memos, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, the
course,
tech memos are really, really.
So comment map is like if you don't want to read the tech memos, but there's this one intersection or this one place where there's a sidewalk gap and you can see the other side, you just can't get there. Or maybe you really want transit service or something like that.
This is neat.
Read that later.
Now, did you show this to the CIC people too?
Yeah.
We should give them a tour of the website.
We can do that.
Yeah.
This would be good to pass on.
I think it would be great.
Emailed them stuff about it. But I don't think
Nothing's
we've
better
done-
than a good
Than
old
a- yeah.
tutorial.
Yeah.
That way they know how to get to it and direct other people to it.
So there's about 100 comments on here so far.
Oh, great.
And you can filter them if you want to see auto-oriented comments, bike, things like that.
Wonderful.
They are listed at the bottom. And when there's a comment, then somebody can reply to your comment. Someone from the public can, we can. So people can sort of talk to each other and have that dialogue. So this one is about 12th in Washington, and then somebody else posted a comment in response to it. This one's about looks like a dangerous intersection. Then somebody else from the public went in there and either agreed or disagreed. It looks like they agreed. We do have some comments on this website that are positive. They're not all negative.
And do we have somebody that kind of looks at them to make sure they're not offensive to?
We have to, so you don't have to join the website to add a comment.
Okay.
But once you do add a comment, there's a slight delay because we'll read it and either approve or
Yeah,
disapprove.
because we don't want.
There's been a couple advertisements that we haven't posted.
Yeah.
But there's
Well, of course, yeah.
people who are unhappy with their parking made it on here, but for the most part, there's about not been anything.
Okay, good.
There's been just 2 or 3 advertisements, and that's it. Everything else made it on the website. So you can zoom in on the map. If you zoom, and you can click on someone's comment, and you can thumbs up or thumbs down if you agree or disagree
Okay, good.
with that comment. People are doing that. It's easy just to kind of go through and read and take a high level of commitment. So with this one, it's talking about speed limit Fifth and Lynn seem to have a lot of pedestrian comments.
You might want to know that John and I are looking at selecting 1 or 2 pedestrian crossings in Oregon City that would be good candidates for the flashing beacon application
That would be
installation. And the other thing that we have concluded is that we've ordered more of the, you can add signs to crosswalk signs that remind people that it's the law to stop.
The one on
And
Leland.
yes, exactly. And so
That's a good
Kevin Hanks, our street supervisor, is ordering some more of those, and you'll see more and more of those going up around town, which I think those are very effective.
Yes,
I agree.
Good.
Well, this is wonderful.
This is.
And then the last page, we just post summaries and our PowerPoint presentations from our meetings. So if you miss a meeting, you can kind of see what we talked about as well.
Yeah, this is great. If you could work it into your schedule for a CIC update, I think that would be great. I think they would be interested.
Can you go to the July 2nd meeting, Laura? Great.
Thank you.
And Laura's just been doing a super job on all this stuff. She's
Thank you.
keeps
We
us all
have
coordinated.
one of the best websites of any cities.
Sometimes I think our technology is advanced so quickly here, and I think our staff really and the commission has supported that.
Oh, yeah.
I sometimes feel like our technology is beyond the capacity of some of the public's interest. Even.
I think you're
You know,
right.
they don't even realize the power of that website and what's available there. And some of
Yeah.
these new things we've launched. I mean, just in the last 2 years, there's been over 20 different improvements,
Right.
and so
This is great.
pretty
Thank
soon we're going
you.
to have democracy, injected in your DNA when you come
I'm
into
sure.
the world.
And they'll put a little mileage on us, so they'll be try to car driving. And
we
how
had
much
for
of a bill
lunch.
to send us.
Whether we like milkshakes or not.
Well, thank you. This was very informative. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, so hopefully the mayor and Commissioner Smith will watch this on the video.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
And
yeah.
and they can see the PowerPoint presentation. It'll
Yeah.
be posted on here too. So
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Nancy. That was really
You're
well,
welcome.
well done.
That was very well.
it was really nice having a good amount of time. So often we
I
get rushed,
know.
and
So
we really
often,
can't.
yeah, yeah.
This is something that it's good to have a complete dialogue.
yeah.
with the
That's
commission
because
about.
women are running the meeting.
I love it. That's all right.
Sorry, David.
That concludes our presentation.
Well, no offense taken. I like diversity. I'm good with it.
Okay, city managers report.
I want to remind you all that the Kanema Park celebration is Thursday, June 14th, 5 to 7 p.m. There's going to be a shuttle leaving from
Moot. Museum
from
of the
the
Oregon
Museum of the
Territory.
Oregon Territory, so please use it because there isn't parking at the park
At the park
because
itself.
it's a neighborhood park, and so we don't want to congest the neighborhood any more than we have to.
Right.
Also, the Willamette Falls boat tour is tomorrow afternoon from 3:30. Is it 3:30, Nancy? Or 3? 3:30 at John Storm Park. John Lewis is going to give us a short description of the IGA on something known as PMAT, and he will explain to you what that is.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
There's just 3 of you. That's
I
hard to
know.
get used to. So there's an agreement, actually, at the June 20th meeting, we're hoping to place on the consent agenda this agreement, it's a PMAT agreement. It's Portland Metro Area Transportation. It's an IGA, basically. And so we didn't think it was that controversial or anything, so we were hoping to just share it with you tonight. Sure. Not necessarily the agreement, we'll put that in the packet, but just kind of go through what this is about and get a head nod on whether or not it'd be okay to put it on the consent agenda. So this agreement's about sharing equipment with other agencies. So we've done that in the past where we've used maybe a larger roller or paving machine, or we've borrowed equipment from the city of Gresham, and most agencies or many agencies in the metro area have signed on to this agreement. So it's something that we think is important for our work as well. It helps us be a little more efficient. We don't necessarily have to go out and rent equipment. Often we don't have to even pay for that equipment. Sometimes we would if it were, a large order, or maybe we were going to use it for several weeks. They may charge that, but there's specifics in the agreement about how that would happen. So we think it's a good idea. The agreement establishes how we would share, how we would maintain, how we would keep that equipment. So it's just good housekeeping. And in an emergency, we have other agreements similar to this, where in an emergency we can exchange equipment, but this one's more like on a day-to-day basis or during a certain season when you need
That's
a
what my-
snowplow or something. So,
My question is, what's the difference between this and an MUA?
MUA,
Mutual aid
agreement, similar, very similar, but this is just a separate agreement that most of the agencies are looking at. So they're calling it an IGA. So we don't have they aren't giving us a choice on the type of agreement. It's just what this group
This is
is
what it
using.
is.
Yes, this
Sign
is
it
what
or
it is.
not.
Sign it or not. right.
I may or may not be completely accurate on this, but I've associated the mutual aid agreements more to emergency situations.
Yeah, right.
And this
Public
is
safety.
for, say, if we want to borrow, like we did last summer, borrow Gresham's big roller so that
Right.
we can do in-house paving that has a much better product than our little roller.
Mm-hmm.
There's already an agreement in place regarding responsibility, liability, how you return it.
Right.
Sort of polite things that you need to have in writing.
And is this,
They're very similar, but you're right. I think I've seen more mutual aid agreements on the emergency end of things. But there's no reason why this agreement wouldn't also apply for.
is this with
an
a
emergency.
specific government body, or is this a general thing with all localities regionally, or?
Right. So there's a fairly long list. The lead agency is Multnomah County, but there's several counties, including Clackamas County, and several cities. Gresham, Salem, Portland, Hillsborough, Lake Oswego, ODOT, TriMet. That's just a few. I didn't list them all. I just gathered some represented examples. But there's a 30-day termination option if we decided we didn't want to be part of that. We share our equipment list with them, and we get to look at their equipment list, and we don't have to list all of our equipment. It's also not just equipment. It's also materials, and it could be services as well.
Could it be staff?
Could be some level of staff. So, like, the kind of things I think of are signal technicians, for instance. If we were in need of more signal technicians, or some of them are more complicated things like
Be an
electricians, could be an operator, anything like that.
Right.
Often, like the milling machine that we borrowed from Gresham, it came with an operator. They don't just loan out that equipment; they send it with operators. So that's what this agreement's about. Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
The agreement's the same for all the agencies that have signed on. It's nothing. We don't have a special agreement, in other words, for this. So we just think it's a really good idea, and we'd like to get it sooner than later. When I realized the July meeting wasn't happening, I was hoping we could get it in the June meeting, the 20th, so that we could maybe borrow some equipment or use some of their equipment.
It'll be in the actual agreement will be in your packet. So if you see it in your packet, you look at it, have any questions, email them to us, preferably before the meeting, and we can answer them before we have to pull it off the consent calendar. But if we do, we do.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Yeah, and
appreciate-
this is just, I love this because it really can reflect some great efficiencies rather than everybody having to have that MRI machine.
Yeah.
You can have just designated ones and share it around. And
Good use of resources.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this update, too, for the consent agenda. I think that's a great idea.
Also, wanted to mention that we're about to sign an MOU with, or a letter of agreement with the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition to do the planning, and we talked about that at our last meeting. They sent me a draft before that meeting, and I updated it since our last council meeting when the commission, or last commission meeting, when the commission wanted us to have an elected official representative on the
right.
planning event. So I've updated that language, and I'm going to go ahead and sign that agreement unless somebody has an objection. And then Commissioner Smith will probably be have another meeting or two to attend. But
There you go. He needs more meetings.
that's
I've heard
we're
that.
going to, and our commitment on that is going to be primarily to provide the public safety, the police for our side of the event. Also, Public Works will have a representative on the planning event committee, and they're going to probably want some portable restroom facilities from each of the cities, perhaps. But
Signs.
and
traffic
signage,
control.
the usual stuff that you
Yeah,
see
cool
for
stuff.
for events. And but we're hoping it'll be a nice event. It certainly seems that it's going to rally the communities on both sides of the river.
I think so.
Also, Water Environment Services, I think I emailed you. I can't remember if I did this by email or some other method, but emailed you that they're getting ready to have a rate increase. As you know, the Board of County Commissioners is the governing body for the Tri-City Sewer District. And so they actually set the rates, and they've approved or are about to approve a rate increase of $2 a month for each equivalent dwelling unit. So the price would be going from $13.35 a month for an equivalent dwelling unit to $15.35. And this year, I did ask about this last year and then again this year, and this year they were pretty responsive to the request that I had, which is I wanted them to provide for us to distribute to the commission and the public a memorandum explaining the need for their increase.
Thank you.
Because last year, they just more or less did it and then said it's going to be just as bad. They're going to do more in the future. And so this year, I really do appreciate the fact that we have, I think, an improved relationship over last year. It'd still be nice to have elected officials from the Tri-Cities, at least one, on the governing board. To me, that's just a more democratic way of governing the district. But until the county board decides that's the way they want to go, I think this explanation is an improvement. So I'm going to hand these out. I think there's a copy for each of you.
Okay, good.
Also, this is another thing that we get annually. We get a survey. The League of Oregon Cities sends out a survey every year. And in this survey, they ask for, the League of Oregon Cities represents all the cities in the state that are members, and I think that's probably all of them. And the League, through their memberships that all the cities pay into, they have a legislative staff that essentially researches and tries to advance legislation that benefit the member cities. And so every year they send out a survey and ask us for feedback on what our priorities are. So Mayor Neely asked me to share this with our executive staff, which I have done. I'm also going to give this a copy to each of you and ask you to return these within a couple of weeks to Katie Riggs.
Oh, yeah.
And then what Katie's going to do is we're going to average all the responses together, and my guess is they're going to be pretty similar. They were last year, but then once we get all the responses, we'll put it onto one sheet and send it off to LOC.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Moving along. Oh, I have light reading for you. These are
light reading.
These are copies of our audit. The audit was completed several months ago, and in it were a couple of recommendations. There were no significant findings. This is for the city. I also have one for Urban Renewal Commission. There were no findings whatsoever for Urban Renewal Commission. So it's a very thin report because it's a very small budget.
Yeah.
And there's a memo on the front kind of explaining it. So I also will, I think you just need 3 of those tonight, and then we'll get the rest of them out to the other commissioners. Speaking of Urban Renewal Commission, Commissioner Pauly, at the beginning of tonight's meeting, you had a suggestion for an agenda item that I think is urban renewal. So I would like to ask, just a matter of procedure, if you wouldn't mind repeating that suggestion at the next Urban Renewal Commission, so that we can get that into the queue for a work session with them.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, sticking on the audit, I also have copies for the city's audit. Now, in the city's audit, there were a couple of findings. In my experience, auditors they need to find something, and we want them to look very carefully for the somethings. When they find somethings, they don't think about necessarily whether the city can do it. So if you've got a very small staff, they want to segregate duties, and many times they'll suggest, well, hire 3 more people to segregate this thing. So sometimes the responses from management are based on economic realities of what
Right.
what the
Right.
organization can afford to do. In this case, there were two suggestions, and these weren't significant findings. They were just suggestions that the auditors made in the Community Development Office, and I want to compliment Tony and his staff while they're here tonight because they did an exceptionally good job of responding to those, and you'll see the responses in here. And if you're not wanting to read all the detailed number backup, there is an executive summary and then a management letter that shows our responses. So it's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, though, about it, please let me know, and we'll give you more detailed information.
Thank you. A lot of light midnight reading.
Too many-
When I can't
Too many rubber bands.
Yeah.
We
And
recycle.
the transportation.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is good news to have a virtually clean audit. I mean, in this day and age, those are increasingly hard to come by.
I agree.
And I think, Scott, you might have had something about an EOT agreement with CHP.
Commissioners, at your places at the dais, I put the draft license. It's titled License to Allow Operation of the End of the Oregon Trail Visitor Center in Oregon City. This is in response to the work session that we had regarding the discussion about the End of the Oregon Trail and specifically Clackamas Heritage Partners' receipt of the grant and the discussion about allowing their use of the interpretive buildings. So this is the draft of the agreement that we intend to bring forward to you at your next regular commission meeting, which is next week. And we just wanted to get it to you in advance of that meeting, allow you the opportunity to read it, and if you have any input or concerns or whatever, if you could let either myself or David or both of us know as soon as you're able to do that. And then I'm going to email it, since there's two of the commissioners that aren't here tonight, to make sure that those two have been able to see it as well. It's very, very straightforward. It's a pretty simple agreement. It just gives basically it's called a license because a license is permission to use property. As our attorneys have described to me, was their recommendation to go for this type of agreement. And it basically just spells out that they're allowed to use our property, being the End of the Oregon Trail Center, under our direction and under our management for the purposes that we've already talked about previously. And the term of this is through basically about an 18-month agreement, which we also discussed at the work session. It's through the end of next calendar year. So unless you have any questions about that right now, I know you haven't had a chance to read this. It's just been at your place, but I just wanted to make sure that you had that, we're aware of it, and as I said, if you have any feedback, please let us know as soon as possible.
So if we have any questions, we should email you in advance?
That'd be great.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Up at the top under recitals, it says ABCE. Is there a D that's missing, or is...
We need to fix that.
Okay.
That's a typo that has already been caught. So this will be refined and revised before we put it on your agenda next week. Thank you. There's no D missing. It was just a typo.
That's good. Thank
We're trying
you.
to be transparent here.
Yes, that's great.
Thank you, Scott. And last but not least, commissioners probably recall about a year ago when there was a little bit of a conflict between the city and a boat operator who was selling barbecue from a motorized vessel at our dock at Johnstone Park. And there was, we got to a point where we had a couple of meetings with that individual face-to-face, and we're able to convince him that the code simply does not allow that kind of activity to be tied up at a dock, and so he seemed to accept that. And then what we found is we've had a few complaints where they're either tied up to the dock or they're a foot away from the dock. That's not exactly out in the channel, so we technically weren't sure, do they have to actually physically be tied to the dock or not? So Scott has researched that with the state Marine Board officials, and we have a lease with the state to operate Johnstone Park on the state waterway, and it requires a 15-foot distance from the dock. So Scott's going to be sending that personal letter and saying, if you're 15 feet 4 inches,
Go for it.
you're out of our jurisdiction, but if you're inside that 15-foot area, it's a problem. And I'm hopeful that letter will be taken seriously, but we do have there's quite a history this summer of activity that's pushing. I don't know. You know, some people just want to test the boundaries of
Absolutely.
enforcement, and I hope that it doesn't come to that, but I have a feeling that it may. So I just wanted to give you folks a heads up that if it continues and the letter isn't heeded, we'll probably be taking enforcement action through code enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else?
I don't.
Okay, we're adjourned.